Hi, I'm Nick, and welcome to another Booktube channel, because that's exactly what YouTube needs. In my first video of this channel, which most likely will not last, I will be talking about which of these post-apocalyptic epic horror fantasy books I prefer, Stephen King's The Stand or Swan Song by Robert McCammon. In case you're not familiar with the books, I'm going to give you a quick synopsis about each. Stephen King's The Stand we'll talk about first. This one you might be more aware of. Stephen King is, one of the most popular authors to ever live, particularly American authors, and this book is considered by many to be his crowning achievement, or at least one of his best books. So this is about a virus, a plague, called Captain Trips, that wipes out much of the planet, or at least the United States. We really only see the point of view of the United States here. And there are few bands of survivors who are, trying to get things back in order in a certain way. There are good survivors, and these good survivors are all having visions or dreams of the same kindly old woman who's basically in the dream saying, "Come find me, let's all get together, and we're just all going to have a really nice apocalypse together. It's going to be wonderful." And the bad survivors are being visited by the walking dude, Randall Flagg. He is very evil, and in the TV miniseries in the 90s, you can tell he's evil because he has a mullet and wears a full denim outfit. But they're all gathering in Las Vegas to do sinister things, I guess. Swan Song, also an apocalypse. Who would have guessed? But in this case, it's not a plague. It is a nuclear holocaust. People have pushed some big red buttons, and we are now in a radiated wasteland. Wonderful. And again, there are bands of survivors, some of them good, some of them bad. The good survivors are all kind of drawn to this young girl, this young woman character named Swan, who has a special ability, which I won't go into, keep things a surprise, and they're drawn to her because protecting her is pretty important. We'll leave it at that. And the bad survivors, they are not really affected by a big bad guy. There is a big bad guy. He's called the Man with the Scarlet Eye, which is a very Stephen King-like name. And he's there, and he's enjoying everyone's suffering, but he's not really pushing things forward the way that Randall Flagg is. He's just kind of a spectator. And the bad characters here, the antagonists, they are also trying to put the world back together, but in their own way, based on their own morality. It's basically sweeping across the landscape, pillaging in the name of discipline and control and order. So, both books, post-apocalyptic and about good and bad people trying to band together and do something. When I first picked up Swan Song, I was really worried it was just going to be a clone of The Stand. I had read this twice in the past. I'm very familiar with it. Stephen King is one of my favorite authors, and he was kind of the first adult author that I really got into when I was growing up. But this one I had not heard of. I heard about it only a month ago from a different Booktube channel that recommended this if you like The Stand. And I was really worried it was just going to be a clone. Really happy that it was not. I got two really distinct flavors of apocalypse here, which is wonderful. To talk a little bit more about The Stand and the conflict here, and the conflict specifically raised by this type of apocalypse, this was a plague, as I mentioned. So because it's a virus, people kind of, people died en masse, but they really just died where they were, and the infrastructure around them pretty much stayed the same. Like, there's still buildings everywhere. Roads are pretty much clear, except for, like, where people died in their cars. And, power lines are still up. They're just not functional because there's nobody running juice to them. The infrastructure is still there. With Swan Song, because it's a nuclear holocaust and bombs have fallen, everything's been leveled. and it is truly like a wasteland out there. If you could find a tiny ramshackle little just like cave or like just shed that's still standing, it's like, oh, thank goodness, I get to get out of the nuclear winter that's outside for a night, you know, before bandits come or a terribly irradiated mutant bobcat comes to try to kill me and eat me. So two very different types of landscapes here, which paint very different pictures for the characters within them. You know, the survivors of the stand, they have it a little bit easier, sort of, because everything is still kind of has the appearance of being a society. Everyone still behaves pretty civilly. Like when they get to, you know, when the good survivors get together and they're trying to put together, you know, a little town again, and, you know, they have to go through bureaucracy and just interpersonal relationships of like, who's going to lead? What's a leadership going to look like? What are we going to do? Like, just, you know, to get the power back on, because that's an option available to us because everything's still there. It just needs to be turned on again. And we need people who could figure that out. That can't really happen in Swan Song because there is no electricity to turn back on. There's just nothing left. So it's literally like scrounging together scraps. You know, the descriptions of what people pretty much have to eat here to survive is just so depressing. If this is one of those apocalypses where it's like, if you survive the initial blast, you know, you're probably not going to actually want to stick around to try to help rebuild. Like, I certainly would be like, oh, I'm done. Goodbye. And I don't say that lightly, but it's really grim in here. So the battle here isn't just to get things up and running again. The battle is literally day to day to survive. It's just getting from point A to point B, finding a place that's not going to collapse on you, finding a place that's safe from natural predators and from other people, and just finding enough food and somewhat clean water to survive. The only conflict here is in that. And for the most part, you know, I mentioned there's good survivors, bad survivors. The good folk here don't even really know that there's an enemy to be fought. To them, the enemy is just the world around them. Whereas this one, everyone that's good is aware of Randall Flagg because they've all been seeing him as well, and they're rejecting him. And all of the bad people know about the good people, and so they're mad at them because it's, you know, being good is bad. Again, vague, a little vague. And I mentioned I really didn't want Swan Song to just be a clone of The Stand, and it really wasn't. Even though both are people dealing with an apocalypse with a large cast of characters, I never felt like there was any repeat here. You know, The Stand came out well before this, and I think there's definitely respect here towards this. But I never once read a character here that made me go, oh, that's like the guy from The Stand. Like, that's a Stephen King character. Even the man with the scarlet eye didn't seem to me like a Randall Flagg knockoff, because they are two really different attitudes here. Randall Flagg is the driving antagonist force here. Like, if it weren't for Randall Flagg, the bad survivors would not be gathering together. They would not be doing anything really other than just being bad people scattered. He really brings them all together. He is who is also, in a way, causing the good guys to get together because they have to, allegedly, in order to fight against Randall Flagg. Whereas in Swan Song, the man with the scarlet eye doesn't do anything to cause the problem. It is the nuclear holocaust. It's presidents pushing buttons. And the man with the scarlet eye doesn't do anything to make them do it. We do it on our own, which is fantastic. And he, even in the book, the man with the scarlet eye is like, I'm just enjoying the show. I literally just, he loves to sit there and just watch and eat some popcorn and watch people destroy themselves. And it's only until very late in this book that he takes an active hand in doing anything. He's mostly just a figure that comes in and spectates. He has a little bit of a motivation early. There's one particular like MacGuffin item that he wants to get a hold of, but even he admits like he doesn't even really know why. He just wants it. It's just something to keep him kind of going. But all of the bad guys in this book, they're bad because they're bad. Like, they are evil people because they are born that way, or they were molded to be like that based on their upbringing, you know? Like, they just did all of this on their own. The army they've put together and the ideology that they have was instilled in them naturally. It was not something put there by a big evil entity. And I really like that. I think, but both are valid. Where my preference starts to come in is specifically in the endings of how the evil is dealt with by the good forces. With this one here, I firmly believe that the ending of this book was gonna happen regardless of what the good characters did. I don't believe that any decision made by a character in this book on the side of good actually had an effect on the outcome of the book. And if you know the ending, feel free to, you know, mention in the comments what you view it as and how, like, oh, it couldn't have happened without them because I've read the book twice and I've seen the TV miniseries and I've talked to people about it, and I just haven't heard a convincing argument yet that the forces of good needed to do anything here. I think this book ends the same way, that the outcome's the same regardless. Swan Song, on the other hand, this is a book where action very clearly leads to the next action. The ending of this book, the finale, even though it's a little bit of like a, you know, wing and a prayer situation, all of the characters are where they are because of decisions that they made prior to that led one after the other, that put them where they needed to be for that to happen. And I hate to use the term, but this one really strikes me as a Deus Ex Machina situation, whereas this one feels more actually built into the characters and what decisions they make. So that is one way in which I would say Swan Song is better than The Stand. And I still say The Stand is phenomenal. This book is great. Please don't freak out. I'm not saying it's a bad book. It's fantastic. It's so good. But that good versus evil ending, it just kind of happens. And it just kind of peters out. And after 1,100 plus pages, I just expected a little bit more. And I expected something a little bit more concrete that was built into all of this setup, you know? That's what I feel like I got here. You know, this is about 900 plus pages, and while I'm reading it, I'm waiting for that Deus Ex Machina that I got here. And just another quick point, I was particularly expecting it here because from what I see in Robert McCammon's author bio is that he is from Alabama. And I've been to Alabama, and if there's one thing that I know is that they love God. They love him. They love him down there. There's churches every corner. So I was expecting Robert McCammon to really, at the end, blindside me with some kind of religious just overtone, you know, just like, and then God came and made everything good. Stephen King is not a religious guy. I mean, he's on the record saying that, I believe. And he definitely drops religion into a lot of his books throughout his career. But this one in particular has always struck me as a little overly religious. Like, it's barely even good versus evil. And it's very strongly to me like God versus the devil. And it doesn't, it's not like there's anything wrong with that. It just feels a bit odd because it feels like a way out. Like, your characters don't need to do as much because you have that aspect to it where, like, oh, no matter what you do as a person, there's always going to be a higher entity that can kind of push things along. Whereas this one, I mean, in fiction, in narrative fiction, I want the characters to cause the ending. Like, I want the characters to be the reason that the book happens. So, anyway, that's my comparisons of the ending. I do think both books are fantastic, and I think you should read both. I especially want you to read Swan Song by Robert McCammon. Yeah, I'm just going to wrap it up there. This has gone on for too long. Thank you for watching this video. Maybe I'll make more.